Well, welcome, Sophie. I'm so excited to chat with you today. I know we're going to dive in and talk about thyroid and all things thyroid, right? Because I think it's so important. I've had my own issues with thyroid in the past. I know you have as well. So let's start there. Like, I want everyone listening to get to know you a little bit better and for you to just share your story, and then we'll get into talking about thyroid.
Yeah, I mean, my story is one of a thyroid journey, so it's kind of all linked together. And like you said, I've had my own history with it. So yeah, I'll start. I'll bring you back to 15 years ago, 16 years ago now, actually. At 16, I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, which I always tell my clients now, if you just remove the I, then you have your diagnosis. It's just BS.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna have to borrow that from you.
Yes, a lot of people do actually.
I love
um,
it.
yeah, so like it's just this kind of catch-all diagnosis for unexplained irritable bowels, like diarrhea, constipation, alternating, bloating, gas, all the things. So I really didn't get any help from that diagnosis, and so I just continued to suffer with all those symptoms for the rest of high school and college. And then after college, I that's where the thyroid stuff came in. I was actually dating somebody who was a very verbally and emotionally abusive, and I was living with him at the time. So it was kind of a constant onslaught of stress and trauma impacting me on a daily basis. And unfortunately, I think that when we look at autoimmunity, maybe we can talk about the triggers, but when we look
Yeah.
at the history, my genetics plus the stressor plus the gut issues, we know that can lead to autoimmunity. And so I started having all these new symptoms. It wasn't just digestive. I had the one that was the scariest, I think, was just this debilitating fatigue. Like I just couldn't get out of bed no matter how much I slept. If I slept 8 hours to 12 hours, nothing. Like I was exhausted. And then I started to lose hair, like a lot of hair. It was like in the bottom of the shower. I just saw all my hair falling out. And then I started having a lot of weight gain. So I'm like, I think like 135 pounds now, and I was like 165 pounds, which I'm 5'7". So it wasn't like, I wasn't in a place where I was obese, but it was just like this extra weight that I couldn't explain. Nothing else had changed. And then I was getting really, really depressed. That was another thing that was really scary. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor told me that she thought I was just depressed. And I was 22, and I was like, look, like, last time I checked, depression doesn't make your hair fall out. Like, what the heck? Like, doesn't make any sense. And truth be told, I was depressed, right? I had all these symptoms, and I had this abusive guy in my life, and
Mhm.
it was not a good look. It was not a good time. So I made her run some blood work, and I always say I was actually one of the lucky ones because I listened to my body pretty soon, I would say, from all these symptoms appearing, went to the doctor, and was also lucky that one of the thyroid markers that doctors actually run, thyroid stimulating hormone, or TSH, was actually something that was off enough for her to diagnose me with hypothyroidism. So there I am, 22, screaming on the top of my bed, like, yay, I'm not crazy. It's not all in my head, right? Like, I was so happy that it was not all in my head. And she's like, oh, just take Synthroid, right? Just take the levothyroxine, and you're good to go. And I was like, great. This is great. So I take it, I feel better. Not all the way better, but a lot better. And then about 6 months later, I'm like, man, I'm having all those symptoms again. I must need a stronger prescription. And now I've had I've had bad eyes since I was a kid. So I just thought it's just like going to get your eyes checked every year. You just need an increase, right? But this time when she ran my TSH, it was in the normal range. So she said to me, there's nothing I can do for you, which
Yeah.
was pretty devastating. And then I pushed her because at this point I had done 6 months worth of research on thyroid, and I had realized there were like 7 other markers that you could run. And what about the antibodies? And what about Hashimoto's? And I started asking her those questions. Well, is the test going to run that? And I see only TSH on my labs. And she said, you're making things too complicated.
What? No way.
Yes. And actually, I didn't remember that until like probably about a year ago. I was looking over my old emails and I saw an email I had sent to a functional medicine practitioner and was like, this is what my doctor told me. And it was like a quote, an actual quote. So
Oh
I
my
know that that was
goodness.
true. So yeah, I'm making things too complicated. You're probably just depressed and there's nothing more I can do for
So
you.
did she try to put you on depression medication too?
She did.
Mm.
She put me she sent me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist confirmed that I was just depressed, and I was put on not levothyroxine, Lexapro. My two L's, levothyroxine and Lexapro, which is an antidepressant. And I am, as of today, taking half, like 0.5 milligrams or something, 5 milligrams every other day. And by the end of the month, I will be off of my antidepressant 10
Oh,
years
that's
later.
amazing. Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. I'll say there's a time and a place for medication, right? But that's amazing that you've worked on your health so much. You'll have gotten yourself to a place where you can fully get off of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's probably a whole other podcast, just the mental health journey. Um, but yeah, so all of that happened, and then just to kind of like round it out to how I got here I basically fired that doctor because she was completely not helping
Yeah.
me. And I was tired of feeling like an 80-year-old woman in a 20-year-old body. And I started searching, and just through a connection, through a person, just through speaking out about what was happening to me, a friend was like, I know this guy, he does this thing called functional medicine. It was like 10 years ago. So like no one really knew what functional medicine was
Right.
at all. It was totally not mainstream. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go all the way up to 181st Street in Manhattan, and see this guy and see if he'll listen to me. And he sat down with me for 90 minutes, and he like
Oh, yeah.
actually listened. And he was like, look, you got to work on your gut and stress. And by the way, your birth control isn't helping you, and we got to work on your liver, and your inflammation's too high, and all of these things. And 3 months later, you're gonna feel better. And he put me on the autoimmune protocol, paleo protocol, which is a pretty intense diet. Don't always recommend that for people. And I did a lot of supplements, and I changed my entire lifestyle, and I came off birth control, and here I am, and I don't have antibodies against my thyroid anymore. And I am still sometimes underperforming with my T4. So I do sometimes still take levothyroxine, and I find it depends on the amount of stress that I'm under, whether or not my thyroid activates again.
I think
So
it's
it
so interesting, right? You've done this long enough that you notice the correlation. So you almost can prepare to know if you have stressful stuff coming up in life. Okay, I'm gonna need to support my thyroid a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. Like right now, I'm detoxing mercury, which is another trigger for Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. And so that's a very stressful process. So I'm taking the levo, and then I'll retest and see if I still need it. And that's something that I empower women to do. Like you can test your own thyroid, you can do your full thyroid markers. Like you don't have to wait for a physician. You can see what's going on, and then you can bring that to a physician. Just because I know so many people, I would say 9 out of 10 clients I have with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's are told, like your thyroid is fine. And it's just because they're just running the TSH only and not the full panel. So
Yeah, which blows my mind because with my clients too, I'm like, I now order blood labs for them because I'm like, you can have your doctor do it, but I will tell you, and you probably have the same problem with clients, if you give them a list, even thyroid marker, even if it's just thyroid markers to go to their doctor to
yeah,
order, I will get half of them back or
yep.
30% of them back. And I'm like, well, this doesn't help me really at all because I need to see the full picture to really understand what's going on. And I think it's so important that we are looking and measuring thyroid. So how do we start there? Let's talk about like what are the different markers? Obviously, you've talked about TSH. Like, yes, that's important. But do you want to go through and kind of talk about what are those main markers that women should be checking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I do have the same issue. Like I send my clients a wish list of all the blood work I want their doctor to run. And it's always so funny to see what the doctors pick and choose.
I know. You're like, how do you? I gave you this whole list, which is very like inclusive and it's like a whole big picture and then you pick like a handful of them.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
understand the thought process, but
I'll say this, like with the antibodies and like the full thyroid panel, the main reason why I think most doctors, there's two main reasons why I think they don't run it, just to clarify. I think, and I'm not a doctor, so maybe they have other thoughts, but this is what I've heard from many doctors is one, they have no separate treatment plan if you have Hashimoto's versus just hypothyroidism. There's nothing else that they would do differently. And two, it's often not covered by your insurance.
it's a
So that's
pretty cheap test though. It's not
yeah,
expensive.
exactly. Yeah. So I always just send people over to ultalabs.com, ULTA, and you can pull your own labs.
Yeah,
That's what I do.
that's great. Yes.
Um,
Order your own labs, ladies. How often, before we get into them, how often do you recommend? I think it's different, right? If someone really needs to be monitoring their thyroid. So,
yeah.
like, what's your answer to that for someone who knows either they have Hashimoto's or that even if they don't have Hashimoto's, they know their thyroid tends to run low or high? Like, how often should someone be testing their thyroid in that category?
I would say if you're stable, you could definitely get away with once a year. If you're not and you're working on different things and you're pulling different levers in your health to like you're changing your diet or you're changing your stress or you're working on pathogens, and we could talk about all the causes in a minute.
Yeah.
And then you want to see if it's helping you, you could run it every quarter, like every 3 months. And see if there's a shift. Or like if you're taking medication, for example, and you want to see, is it working or is it working to its fullest extent? Do I need an adjustment? And you're working with a physician to adjust your medication, then, they might, or you might want to try like every 3 months or every 6 months, something like that.
Yeah. Great advice. But if someone doesn't know, they're like, "Oh, have I ever even tested my thyroid?" I would say
Yeah.
go do it now. And then
Do
I
it.
think, don't you think yearly blood lab, just in
Yeah.
general, I think is
Yeah.
a good idea. So you can kind of just keep an eye on things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like my clients usually after they've done the full 6 month program with me, I'll just like tell them they can come back and do like we can do a blood work or other labs that I love every year, kind of as like their annual physical. And it's funny because they always say, "Oh, I find this more helpful than my actual annual physical." I'm like, "Well, you still have to do both." but
Right, right.
um, but don't just like give up on all of Western medicine. It's still important. But it is funny. Like we can kind of make those choices, and I think it's helpful just kind of get a litmus test. And also, I'll just say one other thing about timing. Like I've had a really good physicians since then, and they've wanted to like try levothyroxine for me and retest it in 6 weeks, like that fast, to actually
Oh,
see if
wow.
it's or if I need an adjustment. So everyone's a little bit different. But to answer your question, your original question about all the labs, like
Yes.
if you're just looking at like your thyroid specifically, which we can get into like the reason why I think that's not enough to help support your thyroid. But TSH is the number that the doctor is going to run, thyroid stimulating hormone. Total T4, free T4, total T3, free T3, reverse T3, thyroid globulin, TBG, and then the TPO and TGAB would be like a full thyroid panel if you're going towards hypothyroid. If you are looking to get your doctor to diagnose you with Graves' disease, the autoimmune of hyper, which is very much more rare, you want to get TSI.
In
But
addition to the other ones.
yeah, you may want to, yeah. But I would say like what I typically honestly tell my clients to get is just the free T4, free T3, the TSH, the reverse, and the two antibodies, because what's really important is that we see, is my thyroid getting the cue from the brain to create thyroid hormone? Is it creating enough of the storage hormone T4? And not creating enough, but just also the availability. So the free T4 is the availability of that T4. The free T3 is going to show the gas pedal. So the free T3 is actually one of the most important markers, because it's not how much is my brain being told to make, not how much is the storage, but how much is available in active form for me to use. That's free T3. Reverse T3 happens if that's elevated, that's showing that the body is kind of pushing T4 to reverse T3 to slow the body down. Like the brakes are being put on, right? So we want more obviously of the gas so we can move, because thyroid can just kind of like really deplete us. That's why I was so tired. And then the TPO and the TGAB, those are markers that a doctor would use to diagnose with Hashimoto's, the autoimmunity. And unlike Western medicine, in my world, there's a lot of different things we would do if someone had a autoimmune disease versus someone having hypothyroidism. Those two
Yeah.
almost totally different approaches, or I would say more steps would be included if someone's already autoimmune.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, can we talk about that? Let's go into that. Like so there is a difference, right? Someone can have a low functioning thyroid but not have autoimmune,
Yes.
right?
Sure.
Although it's probably more common to see low thyroid and antibodies present.
In the United States, I think it's now 99% or 95% of people with hypothyroidism, the cause is Hashimoto's, the autoimmune
Oh,
disease.
that's really high.
It's very high.
Crazy high.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is really, really common. I would say sometimes, when clients come in to see me, and again, I'm not diagnosing, but I'll just see like in their blood work, like there's no antibodies, but they have all the symptoms of hypothyroidism, and maybe their T3, T4 is a little under. And they've had a lot of like the triggers that could cause autoimmunity, but they might not be there yet, which is great.
Because you're catching it before it happens. That's what I love about the work that we get to do is it's so fun when you start to put pieces together and you're like, oh, wow, I'm so glad this person came to work with me now and didn't wait 6 months or 5 years or 10 years, because they really would be in the hurt box. Like, it's crazy when you see the pieces that are starting to shift and go in directions that, yeah. So it's great that when you can catch it, I mean, that's like perfect if you can catch it before it really gets out of control.
I would say I always get really excited about that topic, because for me, like, no one ever took the time to be like, hey, you have gut issues that could lead to autoimmunity and like all these other things. Like if I met somebody earlier, I might not have had to deal with all that stuff. So I'm such a big advocate. If you're starting to have symptoms, you've tried things already and you're not getting the support you need yet, do this deeper work, because it could be so much more time consuming, so much more painful, so much more money, 5, 10, 15 years down the line. And I have the whole gamut. I have the people who are like on it, like the second they're like, nope, unacceptable to feel this way, I want to get support. And I have people who've been in it for like 20 years. And it just takes so much longer when we've been sick for so long.
Yeah, it does. So when we're hearing you say that, okay, 95 to 99% of people who have low functioning thyroid, it's actually driven because they've got autoimmunity. Crazy. But I guess I look at that as like, well, but there's a lot we can do with improving the body and helping reverse the autoimmunity, or at least sending it into remission, I guess, however you want to look at it, right?
Yes. The word's funny. I always, I think I usually use remission for me personally, because I just don't have the antibodies, but I know that it's kind of like it's always there. I always have to be taking care of myself. It's not like I just like throw everything out and just don't take care of myself, because I know that as soon as I did that, I would definitely have the symptoms and the antibodies again.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what are some of those, like, maybe markers or symptoms. I know you talked about some of them because you had them, but what are like some of those top symptoms? Say someone's listening and they're like, I haven't checked my thyroid markers, I haven't done any of these testing you guys are talking about, which is fine. It's fine. It's never too late to do it. Like, what are some of those initial things that you see, like, that are pretty consistent across the board with your clients that you see having, underfunctioning thyroid and markers that could indicate they've got, antibodies present for their thyroid?
Yeah. So I would say fatigue is probably number one, because our thyroid controls our metabolism. So it slows everything down when we're hypo, right? Hypo meaning slow. So that includes our ability to convert nutrients into energy. right? So it just slows that whole process down. So fatigue, like the type of fatigue I was talking about, like not, oh, I just one day I got 6 hours of sleep and I feel a little tired today. Like the type where, I mean, it was like so bad that if I put on like my backpack, it felt like I was carrying like, 100 pounds in my back. It was just so heavy. Hair loss is a really common one. Hair loss can be caused obviously by a lot of other things, but hair loss is a pretty big one. Constipation, right? Because our bowels will also slow down. So constipation.
That's interesting. So you see constipation in correlation with people who have sluggish thyroids, which makes sense, right? Because they're probably not, their whole detox pathways are probably just
Yes.
plugged up.
Yes. Their liver is stagnant, their colon, their large small intestine, they usually have, because of that, either SIBO or just a bacterial overgrowth because the food isn't getting through. So it's fermenting and causing issues. Another thing, our thyroid regulates our temperature. So most people with hypothyroidism feel very cold. It's the type where you're like wearing, a sweatshirt on a warm summer day and you're still cold, or your hands and feet are always cold like ice. You can have like hoarseness, like especially if you have any like goiters or things like going on with your thyroid. Hoarseness is part of it. Muscle weakness, it's harder for people with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism to have recovery with muscles. So muscle weakness, puffy, you can feel very puffy in the face. And then so in addition to that, weight gain, right? Because it slows your metabolism down. So it's like, wow, I'm exercising, I'm eating well. Why am I gaining all this weight that I can't explain? That's a
Right.
big like tip of the hat to thyroid to get checked. Dry skin, right? Really dry skin. That was another thing. I had really brittle nails and dry skin. And then another one that people always miss is high cholesterol. Always. It's like I see it and I'm like, what's going on with the thyroid every time? Thyroid, where is the thyroid? So those are some of the ones I see most often. Brain fog, another one. Depression.
Okay. Yeah, those are great. I mean, some of them are common, I feel like we know, and others, like since you do so much work with with women with Hashimoto's and thyroid dysfunction, it's neat to see how you put so many pieces together. So I think there's so much that we can put together from symptoms versus, again, always just looking at a test, right? Because sometimes tests, if you just go off a test, we're going to miss stuff. That's where a lot of medical professionals miss things, right? You go to your doctor and they do your labs. You're like, oh, you're fine. And then you're like, no, but I'm not.
Yeah, I know you said you had a whole day recording with FDNs, and like as an FDN, what we are always
Yeah.
taught is never, like, you're not treating anything specifically. You're looking at the symptoms and the correlation to the lab, and then you're making suggestions towards lifestyle to support the whole body. And I think that has served me so well, because I find a lot of
Yeah.
people end up chasing these labs, and labs are important, but they're only one part. They're only one tool. And it's important to think about the whole person.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Okay. So let's go into the scenario of someone either listening who has been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, or maybe listening to everything that you just said is like, ooh, I should go get my thyroid, levels checked and see what's going on. Like, what's kind of the first thing for these women to address in their, I'd say, lifestyle? I mean, obviously we can go do more testing. You and I are both for going and doing some, working with someone like yourself or myself, and someone who can really dive deeper. But like, what are some of those first steps that women could do to start improving and getting their thyroid to start moving, and like stalling where we're at and start moving it back in the right direction?
Yeah. Okay, let's break it
Let's
down.
break it down.
Okay. So, factors that inhibit the proper production of thyroid hormone. We've got inadequate nutrition. So, the thyroid is a nutrient hog. It needs iron, B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin D. magnesium, vitamin C. Did I say that already?
That's okay.
Selenium,
Yeah.
zinc, tyrosine, iodine. It needs a ton of nutrition. So if you're looking at, your food intake and you're like, oh man, I eat like maybe a lot of fast food, or I don't really know if I'm eating enough. A lot of times I hear that, like, we're just so stressed out, we're skipping meals and things. So eating 3 meals a day that are rich in those nutrients, it's usually going to mean high quality animal protein and lots of leafy green vegetables, beans and legumes if you tolerate them. Some people with Hashimoto's do not tolerate those things. We can talk about like elimination diets too, but I usually err on the side of like, let's add all the good nutrition in, because I know for me, I was not eating well. Okay, so we want to always add in. All right. So that's step one with the nutrition and those specific nutrients. If you're looking at your thyroid labs and you're making enough TSH, you're making enough free T4, but you're not converting it to T3, selenium and zinc specifically on a nutrition and potentially supplement if you're working with somebody who can recommend supplementation, super helpful. And little pro tip: 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a day gives you enough selenium for what your body needs. So that's great. Okay, so that's kind of like nutrition world. And then I would say flip side is there anything we need to remove for the thyroid to function properly? I have yet to meet somebody who doesn't do well on a gluten-free diet if they have Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism. And that research is pretty in depth about how there's molecular mimicry where the body gets confused and starts attacking the thyroid, thinking it's the gluten. When I gave up gluten, I lost 10 pounds and had no more brain fog and no more fatigue. So let's put it that way, right? I've seen amazing results. So that is definitely something I would consider. Like, I always tell my clients, try like a 30-day gluten-free trial and let's see if it makes you feel better. And 100% of the time it does.
I was to say, do you ever have someone who doesn't feel better when they take gluten now? I haven't.
Nope.
Nope.
Never.
Nope.
Never, ever. And something about, and then that leads me into the gut, because gluten opens up the tight junctions. Okay. And we know that leaky gut is one of the 3 things we need in order to have an autoimmune disease. So we need a stressor, we need genetics, and we need leaky gut. So leaky gut can be caused by a lot of different things, but 100% of the time and 100% of individuals, we know that gluten opens up those tight junctions, causing the gut to be more permeable, which allows for the immune system to become overreactive and start to attack all these different things until it gets so overreactive that it can attack our own tissues. And in this case, the thyroid, causing those antibodies on the test results that we were talking about earlier. So gluten is like a hard no. if I have a client with hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, like, no, we gotta get that out. And it's great because it's an easy win for them to feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then other things that can impact, the thyroid that we have a lot more control over than we think is gut and liver. Now, this is where I would recommend doing some lab testing. A lot of people with Hashimoto's and hypothyroidism have parasites. Blastocystis hominis, fun word to say, is really, really, really common. Also, yeast is very overgrowth of yeast is very common. And then H. pylori. So I like to test, not guess, in that part of it, because I don't know what I'm trying to address. You can't address that with probiotics and prebiotics. You need to actually get rid of the parasite or the yeast or whatever is overgrowth.
Yeah, and this is where I want to pause you, because I want to, you just said, I think is super important, right? When I have people say, well, I'm taking my probiotics and maybe eating my prebiotic foods, but I'm not feeling any better. My digestion isn't getting better. And it really comes down to what you just said, is it's like, well, you've got bugs in your gut. I know that sounds kind of gross, but it is what it is. And so many people,
we are human.
Yes. And until you know what's in there and then figure out what to do about it, many times those digestive issues will get worse. Now, obviously, taking out some of the inflammatory foods can be very, very helpful. And when you stop feeding them so much sugar and carbohydrates, like it can be beneficial, but ultimately, like you and I both see, like you have to do the testing to figure out what's there to eradicate it in the correct way, like being key.
The
Correct.
correct way, the correct steps,
Yes.
correct process. I see that all the time. People spin their wheels. They're like, well, I tried a probiotic and that didn't work. And it's like, I get that because I did that for 7-8 years when I had the IBS. But really the IBS is the reason I say just remove the I and it's BS is because it's not. It's yeast. It's parasites. It's bacteria. It's leaky gut. Always. It's
Always.
always that. Like I have yet to see a clean GI test, right?
Same here. Yep. Same here.
So, and it's not like because it's everyone's fault. It's like we are so we're living in toxic soup. We're so exposed to things. So and we all come in contact with parasites. You don't have to travel outside of the country to get parasitic infection. You can just come in contact with it and then your body might be weakened and not be able to deal with that parasite.
We can get it from food. You can get it from
food. Just sitting on your food. Yeah, I know it's gross, but it's just a fact. So we can deal with it straight on and then get places faster. And that's when I hired that functional medicine doctor and he found all the stuff that was in my gut. And we did the 3-month eradication protocol and the rebuilding of my gut and the food stuff. I was better in 90 days after struggling for so long, like so many years, right?
Yeah.
So
that's what took me, I'll say too, that's what took me, got me over a big plateau. And I did it myself, Sophie, cause I was working with the functional doctors I was working with. They stopped at hormones. They're like, it's hormones. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know my hormone. I get my hormones are I've had hormone problems since I started cycling at 14. I get it. I hear you. But I'm like, why are we not addressing our gut? And so that was when through FDN, I was like, I'm going to just do it myself. And I will tell you, when I ran protocol myself and did everything, I was like, dang, my gut is better now than it's been in my previous 37 years of life.
Yes.
It's amazing. Why did it take so long? That kind of sucks, but better late than never. So,
Yeah. And also just a quick plug on what you just said is our hormones didn't just decide to stop working. Usually it's stress in our gut that cause hormone imbalances. So that was not the right approach to go, anyways, but
yeah, I know hormones, our poor hormones. I always say our hormones, they just poor hormones. They really just get blamed for everything. And it's not their fault. It's really not their poor fault.
No, I know. They really get the short end of the stick. But yeah, so we're talking about gut. So we have to deal with the toxins in our gut, the LPS, lipopolysaccharides that create inflammation and can travel through the gut that's leaky all over the body and cause inflammation. Okay, so that's really, really important. There can be other toxins. Like I mentioned, I'm detoxing mercury. Now I had 9 silver mercury fillings in my mouth. So, 9.
So, okay, I have a question. Okay, I'll derail here for a second. I want to talk about this because did you have them all removed?
Yes.
Did you have them all removed at the same time or multiple sessions?
I did it all at the same time.
You did. Okay.
Yeah.
Now let's say so people listening that have mercury fillings, I do agree that it's a good idea to get them removed. I will say the most important thing is that you go to someone who does it correct, because otherwise you're going to actually expose your body to more mercury.
Correct.
Do you want to talk about your experience? Because I don't have any, luckily I don't have any mercury fillings. But will you speak to your experience on that? Because I do know mercury and is highly correlated with just autoimmunity in general and health problems.
Yeah. Autoimmunity, it definitely inhibits the proper production of thyroid hormone. It's a neurological toxin. So, all that depression and anxiety, all of a sudden, I'm coming off my meds and I'm not having that. Now I've worked on my gut. I'm detoxing the mercury. I've done somatic work, subconscious mindset work, a lot of other stress and trauma work, but it really impacts our brain. So if you do have silver mercury fillings, If you can afford to get them removed and removed properly, it's really important. Now, what do we mean by removal properly? You want to go to a biological dentist. Okay, it's really important that uses the correct way of removing things. You can look on their website. I think it's called SMART, SMART. Make sure that they're doing it that way and that they're certified. So what that means is that they are going to do several things to protect you, because the two highest moments where mercury is going to come in contact with your body is when it's going into your teeth and when it's coming out. So if you go to a regular dentist, they just rip it out. You can actually have a lot of health issues.
Yeah, people can get really sick from that. I do know that. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, those things is not recognized by the medical community, so of course it's not covered by insurance. So this is what I did. I found out about this 5 years ago. And so ever since then, imagine every single day knowing that you have 9 things in your mouth that are causing you to have symptoms. Like it was awful to have that knowledge. And then when I went to a biological dentist in the States, it was going to be $15,000 for removal. So I was like, okay, can't do that.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So what I did was, after 4 or 5 different referrals from FDNs, and then finally from Dr. Caitlin, who I'm working with right now on the detox, I went to American Biodental in Tijuana in Mexico. They pick you up from the airport. They drive you to their office. They did a let me know how much it was going to be beforehand. They were able to do each quadrant, like one every day. So I was able to get stuff out in 3 sessions and put the new stuff in. It was the best medical experience I've ever had in my entire life. They totally took care of me. They totally loved on me. They were like, we've got you, it was amazing. And it was just incredible. And it only cost me $4,000 as opposed to 15. So that was a huge cost savings. Even with the hotel, even with the flight, it was way cheaper than doing it in the States. And I didn't feel unsafe or anything while I was there. So I loved my experience with them. And then what I did on top of that was, I've been working with Dr. Caitlin from the Dental Detox, and she is a functional practitioner who specializes in mercury and heavy metal removal properly. So what we did was, we worked for about 2 weeks to a month before I had the removal to open up the detox pathways, just like you would for detoxing anything like mold or gut issues, right? We want to open up the colon and the liver and the lymph and all these different parts, so that when you get that exposure, when the mercury comes out of your mouth, because you're going to get some, even if you do it biologically, you're still going to get some, it doesn't cause more congestion and issues. So we did that. Then I did a vitamin C flush the day of the mercury removal. I did a lot of binders to bind up as much mercury as I could. Lots of support on the gut for the leaky gut to kind of capture any other mercury that could have been seeping down into the gut. And then we did a body detox. And now I'm starting the brain phase of the detox. So the point is to detox it from your body first, because the mercury is off-gassing. Every time we chew, we drink hot liquid, brushing our teeth, grinding our teeth is off-gassing. So we want to, it's not just, it's removed and I'm done. We want to detox it from our organs, from our soft tissue. And what is the main place that most of that mercury goes? Of course, our brain. So we detox the body first, and then the brain after that. And so that's what I've been up to since February. It's been quite a journey.
Fun. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, it's been great. It's been a wild ride.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm so happy to have it out. My skin is so much better. My anxiety is so much better. There's so many marked improvements that I've had since getting it out.
I think this stuff is so important. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because we just don't talk about it enough for people to even know what they can do anything about it,
I feel like I'm on this planet to shout it from the rooftops that you have so much that you can do, and you're not destined to a life of pain and suffering. You really are not.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I totally am right there with you. Okay.
An experience.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question. I didn't put this in my notes before. So if you don't know the answer, that's totally fine. But what are your thoughts on fluoride as it relates to thyroid function?
So fluoride's an antagonist to iodine and you look at the step of what the thyroid needs, the first step is iodine and tyrosine. So I'm not personally going to have anything to do with fluoride. And no. And if you also look at the reason why we have fluoride in all of our water supply, you'll find out that it's kind of an interesting story. They like did it as an experiment and then found out later that it could cause issues, but then it was already in the water supply. So, anyways, I don't brush my teeth with fluoride. I use a product called Revitin, and I'm actually really excited. There's this new product called getting it really quick. There's this new product called Bristle. They sent me a test, and it's going to test my microbiome health in my oral microbiome.
Oh, in your mouth. Oh, that's
in my
cool.
Mouth. Yeah. So
Let's see.
Yeah. So I'm going to see like how well the Revitin's working, but yeah, I don't do fluoride, and I don't go to like a regular dentist anymore. I go to a biological dentist, so they would never use fluoride, but you can, if you are like concerned about fluoride. Two things that I did even before the removals was I got a good water filter that filters out fluoride because it's in our water supply, and then I swapped to non-fluoride toothpaste, and then I also would just ask the dentist to not do my cleaning with fluoride.
Yep, I second everything you just said, because people will say, "Oh, fluoride, it's good for your teeth." It's like, it's bad for your thyroid, and it can really screw up your thyroid. Like and again, like you just said, go do some research, go actually dig, don't just Google and see what comes up on the first page. It's backed by big pharma. Go actually, I don't know why big pharma would back fluoride. That doesn't make any sense to me, but you may have to do some actual like digging into it, but there is, cause I've read it too. And I am very anti-fluoride. So there's so many other things that come down to dental health. Again, a whole conversation for another day. But I always love the conversation of fluoride and then thyroid. And then it's like, wait, it's really, really bad for your thyroid, and not to mention many other things, but yet we push it in the dental. And like, this still boggles my mind, right? That it's one thing that it's like in our water still, but why is it still in our toothpaste? Why is it still in rinses if we know it's bad for us? Someone please explain that to me. I cannot get my head around that. And I've been anti-fluoride for 20 years, like way before it was a thing.
I think it comes down to lawsuits. I mean, like even the mercury, right? Like they still will not necessarily say that mercury is bad for you in the fillings, because if they did, they would have so many lawsuits on their hands.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Right? Like you can't just come out and claim that, because then like someone's going to be left holding the bag. That's my like thought. I don't know for sure, but that's what I think.
Great. It's a great perspective. So yeah. Okay. Sophie, there is a question that I wanted to just bring up and bring awareness to, because in my audience, I do have a lot of women in that age of having babies, planning to have another baby, or maybe they've had miscarriages, right? And I now, because I see it, and when I do coaching calls inside my programs, the conversation of Hashimoto's comes up a lot. And I've personally worked with women who've had miscarriage, and her doctor missed checking her thyroid levels. And I discovered, oh, wait, we've got some major sky high thyroid antibody markers. So maybe we should do something about that to see if we can get your body in a healthier place, so then you can carry a baby to term, right? Healthfully. So will you speak to that and just the importance of all that? And, I don't know what moms can do, or women in that time of their life where they are wanting to have either another baby or planning to get pregnant. Well, I'd say near future, but even future at all, ever.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really have a healthy pregnancy if we don't have healthy thyroid. So, it's almost surprising to me that the doctor didn't run a thyroid panel, because I know with some of my clients that have gotten pregnant, that's one of the first things that the doctor is running.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be. Yeah.
So I think that it's a really important part, right? Because our thyroid, I always, you know, how you said like the hormones get blamed for everything. And so, but if we look from a top down perspective, we know that insulin and cortisol are like top two, will impact everything downstream. And I would say that thyroid will impact your progesterone, your estrogen levels, we know are just so important for pregnancy, for reproduction. Our thyroid health is going to control our temperature. Our temperature needs to be a certain temp for us to maintain pregnancy. So all of that, I think, is really important to urge your doctor or find a new one, right? If they're not going to run a thyroid marker on you, then, you know, that is something to really consider. I would also say it's very common to have postpartum hypothyroid come up because of the stress of, you know, of having that baby. So that's something also, you know, to consider. Yeah, get the thyroid test done. Get your doctor to run it. It's so important when you're pregnant. And I would also say, well, if you're thinking about becoming pregnant, you that's a goal or something that you're desiring, you know, go back and listen to the beginning of this podcast when I talked about all the nutrients that your thyroid needs, right?
Yeah.
Get the GI maps test done and clear out the gut. I'm a really big proponent of working on the health of mom and dad before trying for a baby, because it can be really devastating, obviously, to go through a miscarriage, or even to have to go through something like IVF when potentially we need to be working on the iron stores or the iodine or the vitamin A or the potassium of mom, right? I had a client last year who had 3 miscarriages before she met me. We saw that her thyroid was underperforming, not enough for a diagnosis, but just enough to potentially cause some symptoms and issues. She also had really low iron and she had some gut issues. So we focused on that, and she got pregnant and carried to term and had a beautiful, healthy baby. So sometimes those kind of almost smaller things can really impact our ability to carry a healthy baby.
Yeah, I love this information. I love these conversations because it's hard to get them in mainstream. It's hard to get them off of social media. It's hard to, unless you're specifically searching for them. And prevention is key. But I know that's hard sometimes because we don't think, oh, we need anything until we start to have symptoms or problems, or we wait till things get to where we feel like, oh my gosh, we can hardly get out of bed in the morning. And again, it's never too late to work on your health. But I just always want to preach like prevention as best as you can, because it can just save a lot of suffering and
So
heartache and things like that. And I also want to just reiterate what you said too, like it and I did an episode on this a while back. So if anyone wants to dive in more, like definitely go listen to that when we talk about fertility. But the male matters too, right? And there was some like, what's the newest information is that like sperm count in men by like a certain age is like 50% lower than it
yeah.
should be. And like, it's crazy. So anyway, I'll just put that out there. Leave everybody, anyone that's in that, planning to get pregnant period of their life, like go search out that or reach out to me and I'll send you the link to that episode, because that was very, very eye-opening and shocking. But I think all these pieces are just so good for us to know, and know that we really have so much more control over our health than I think sometimes we feel like we do. So I always
A
think
lot
it's
more
exciting.
control.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
We have a lot of control. We're told that we don't, but we have a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Sophie, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like you really want to share, or leave everybody with today?
Um, yeah, I would just say, well, two things. One on more of the like emotional scale is
Yeah.
like you are so worth it and worthy to get your health taken care of and to be fully supported. And yeah, don't let that hold you back. I see that hold a lot of women back, like, oh, I don't know if I'm really worth like investing in my health, or all these things. And it's like, yes, you are. You're born on this planet, so therefore you are worthy of the best support and care. And then just a couple other things that we don't necessarily have time to go through all the details, but if you're like thinking through the list, stress and trauma will directly cause hypothyroid issues. So that needs to be addressed, and it's something that is often missed. So just if you're like, oh yeah, I've worked on my gut, I eat enough, or I eat the right nutrients, or I supplement with the right things, and you haven't dealt with stress or underlying trauma, then that is something that I've had to personally go through in order to get on the other side of this. That was part of this. And then the other part is, the other test that I always run is an HTMA to get the mineral status, because if you are low in potassium and high in calcium, even if your thyroid is making all the nutrients it needs, you're not going to get it into the cell. So that's something that I've seen over and over and over again, really, really help my hypothyroid clients.
I love HTMA too. And that one's really pretty inexpensive, and you can get a lot of information from it. It's awesome. I love that test.
So the only other things I would say to look into if you're like still struggling with thyroid disease.
Awesome. Well, Sophie, will you let everyone know where they can find out more about you or reach out to you if they have any questions?
Yes. My Instagram DMs are always open. There is no stupid question. Please shoot me a message. I'm happy to help you. Obviously thyroid is super near and dear to my heart. So please just reach out. All of everything, my podcast, my website, my Instagram, soon to be LinkedIn, everything is at She Talks Health. She Talks Health is like where you can find it, shetalkshealth.com, She Talks Health podcast, and the Instagram. And then I do actually have a thyroid health guide. It's a free resource that I can send to you guys, or it's on my website. And I do have also like a very inexpensive thyroid class, like a master class that I taught called Overcoming our Life After Hashimoto's. And that's on my website as well. And I can send you the link for that. I think it's like $30 or something to watch the masterclass.
Yeah, send me those links and I'll be sure to include them for sure. I think that information is so valuable. So thank you so much, Sophie. It was so great to chat with you again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it was fun to have to come onto your podcast this time. So awesome. Well, thank you for having me.